My son hadn't called me in years until he learned how much I'd saved. The knock came on a Tuesday, the kind of soft, polite knock people use when they want to appear respectful.
While planning to take something from you. I opened the door, and there he was, Kevin, older around the eyes but wearing that same careless smirk, and beside him stood his wife, Denise, clutching a tote bag and scanning my porch like a loan officer. "We're moving in for a bit," he said, stepping forward without asking. "You have all this space and, well, after everything you've saved, it's only fair we stick together as family." Family. The word landed like a dull coin on a counter, hollow sound, no weight. I stepped aside, not because they were welcome, but because the story would go down easier in the living room where the light was clean, and my hands could rest on the armchair I'd paid for in small, disciplined installments. They rolled in, their suitcases as if they were entering a hotel suite I'd reserved for them. "Nice place," Denise said, already measuring walls with her eyes, already deciding where my things would go once hers replaced them. I smiled the way you smile at mischievous children playing with matches. "Sit," I said. They sat. The house felt too quiet for what was happening, the grandfather clock breathing out each second like a witness. I poured coffee, mine first, then theirs. Kevin took it like it was owed. "So," he began, "I heard about your savings." I traced the rim of my cup, the steam a gentler sheen than the heat rising in my chest. "From whom?" I asked. "Exactly." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. News grows legs in a small town, and greed gives it a jetpack. "It's not about the money," he said quickly, glancing at Denise for approval. "It's about making sure you're not alone. You shouldn't be managing so much by yourself at your age." At your age. I let the phrase hang like a cobweb no one bothers to clear. "What do you think I've been managing these last years?" I asked. "If not myself?" He ignored the question. Denise leaned in with a buttery smile that never touched her eyes. "We want to rebuild," she said. "Help out with chores, errands, keep you company, you know? And in exchange, maybe we can use the guest room while we get back on our feet. Just for a while." The guest room. The room I kept for birthdays. And small mercies, for nieces and a friend escaping a bad night. "How long is for a while?" I asked. Kevin shrugged like time was elastic when other people were paying. "Until things stabilise." That was the word they always used, stabilise, when what they meant was settle into my resources like a warm bath. I looked at them the way I might examine a locked door for hairline cracks. "Before we talk rooms," I said softly, "tell me what you think you know." He swallowed, then put on a face that he wears when he pretends to care. "People said you were good with money. You saved a lot. Decades of careful planning. We were proud." Proud. He never called to say it, not once. "And you concluded," I said, "that your pride entitled you to a key?" He laughed. Denise did not. She was studying the mantel, where a photo of Kevin at 22 smiled with uncomplicated love at a future that would teach him sharper math. "Mum," he said, "don't make this weird. We're family. Family shares." I thought about the nights I shared with the dark when the fridge hummed and the numbers in my ledger lined up like soldiers, about the double shifts, the quiet, lunches at my desk, the thrift store coats I learned to turn into elegance with a lint roller and patience. About the year the car needed a new transmission, and I walked to work until spring, because compound interest doesn't comfort you if you betray it. "Yes," I said, "family shares." I reached for the remote and turned off the lamp beside him so the room rested in the honest, lean light of afternoon. I have learned that truth sits better in simplicity. "And what are you sharing today?" He blinked. "We brought groceries," Denise offered. A plastic sack by the door sagged with instant noodles and a bottle of sauce. I nodded. "So you arrived with noodles and suitcases and announced your move-in." Denise lifted her chin. "We thought you'd be happy to have company. Big house gets lonely." "It only feels big," I said, "when you stuff it with things that don't belong." The kettle ticked as it cooled. Outside, a crow hopped along the fence like a metronome. Time. steady and unsentimental. "Kevin," I said, "why now?" He opened his mouth, but honesty beat him to it in the lines at his temples. "We hit a rough patch," he said. "Work slowed, rent's insane. We just need a soft place to land." There it was. Not a reunion, a landing pad. He looked around at my floors, my curtains, my quiet, and saw cushioning for his fall. "And my savings?" I asked. He inhaled like a swimmer about to plunge under. "It's not right for you to carry it alone. We could help, manage things, maybe consolidate, optimize. We've been watching videos." Denise's face brightened. "Yes, we can teach you about investing apps. Also, we noticed your porch needs repainting and that can affect resale." "There is no resale," I said, "only a home." The words rearranged the air. Denise blinked. Kevin shifted. It was time to cut a careful line. Not with shouting. Shouting is a blunt instrument, and I prefer fine tools, but with questions that lead careless feet to the cliff they chose. "What do you believe you're owed?" I asked. Kevin's jaw tensed. "Don't say it like that." "Like what?" "Like we're villains," he said, and the coffee on his tongue must have turned bitter because he set the cup down, louder than he intended. "You're my mother. You saved while we struggled. It's natural for family to redistribute." He was reaching for a moral that would forgive the arithmetic. I studied his hands. They were my father's hands when he was young, capable, impatient, never empty. Something softened in me, and then hardened again, because softness without boundaries is just an invitation. "Do you remember?" I asked, "the year you moved out?" He nodded, wary. "You said you needed freedom." I said, "Take the couch, take the pots, take the fan." "You took the fan and the good knife." "I slept light that summer, but I slept proud." "Remember?" He said nothing. Denise checked her phone, bored with nostalgia that did not include her. "That was the year I opened a separate account and put in $20 every Friday," I said. "No matter what. Even if it came from coins, I named it Quiet Future. I never told anyone because sometimes telling people is how they talk you out of your own life." He looked away. "So you've been saving since then?" "Long before," I said, "but that was when I decided I would never again be surprised by a winter I could see coming." Denise smiled like a magician's assistant. "That's wonderful. And now we're here to make sure that future is used wisely." Used wisely. I took that phrase and turned it over like a stone. "Do you think the person who built Quiet Future lacks wisdom?" "No," she said quickly, "of course not. We just mean..." "Guided. By whom?" I asked. "You?" Colour climbed Kevin's neck. "This is getting hostile." "No," I said. "It's getting precise." I stood, set my cup on the saucer without a sound, and walked to the window where the maple I planted 12 years ago held its shape against the afternoon. You learn about time from trees. They don't rush. They simply insist. "You arrived with hunger and a plan," I said to the glass. "Hunger I understand. Plans I respect. Entitlement I do not. Silence. The good kind. The kind that tells the truth you are avoiding." I turned back. "I will ask 5 simple questions. Answer truthfully, and we will know what this is. Lie, and we will also know." Kevin bristled. "This is ridiculous." Denise, to her credit, whispered, "Let her ask." So I did. 1, I said, counting on my fingers because numbers behave even when people don't. "If you had not heard about my savings, would you be here today?" Kevin's mouth opened, closed. Denise's eyes flicked right toward the guest hall. 2, I continued. "How many months since you paid a bill on time without borrowing to do it?" Kevin flinched. 3, how much exactly do you believe a little help amounts to? Neither spoke. They had not prepared for specificity. They came with fog and found a lighthouse. 4, who told you I saved? Kevin swallowed. "And 5, I said, hand lowering, "what will you give in return that is not a promise?" The clock hummed. A neighbour's dog barked twice and fell silent. Denise's face rearranged into something smaller. "You make everything a test." "Only things that matter," I said. "Answer, and then we'll discuss casseroles and paint." Kevin stared at his knees. a boy again for a second. "No," he said finally, voice low. "We wouldn't have come." "Not now, maybe later. I don't know." He blew out a breath. "It's been months," he added. "Bills. We're behind." He lifted his chin, defiance tugging at the edges. 15,000 would help. Just to stabilise. There was that word again. Denise looked miserable. "And who told you?" I asked. He hesitated. "Aunt May," he said at last. "She ran into you at the bank," I nodded. I would bring May a pie later, and a lesson about banks and gossip, and how a friendly wave can cost a person their peace. "And the 5th? Kevin frowned. "What we give?" "Yes," I said. "What arrives with your suitcases besides your burdens." He looked at Denise, then back at me. "We can help around the house," he muttered. "Errands, mowing, fixing stuff." "You don't mow," Denise said before she could stop herself. He shot her a look. I sat. "Here is what I will give you now," I said. "Not money, clarity." Their heads tilted like sparrows. "You have asked to move into a life I paid for with years," I continued. "You have suggested your presence is protection for me, when in truth it is shelter for you. You have wrapped your request in the ribbon of family, hoping I won't cut the knot." Denise flushed. Kevin shifted, fingers drumming a rhythm of nerves on his knee. "I am not cruel," I said, "and I am not confused. I am also not a vault with a pulse. What I am is a woman who learned how to make a dollar behave and how to stop mistaking guilt for generosity." I let that sit. "So here is my answer for today. You may not move in. Not today. Not with suitcases and a story I did not write. If this is family, it will prove itself in daylight over time, with small, consistent deeds that expect nothing back but a cup of coffee and a good laugh. If this is need, it will speak plainly and accept boundaries like adults. If this is opportunism, it will object to every condition I place in front of it." Denise opened her mouth, then closed it when Kevin touched her wrist. He stared at the carpet for a count of 5, and then lifted his eyes to mine. "What conditions?" he asked. I smiled, not unkindly. "Tomorrow," I said, "you will come back without luggage. You will bring a written list of what you owe and to whom. Not round numbers. Exact. You will bring a schedule for what you can pay if you cut the things you don't need. You will bring a plan for work that is not a scheme but a job. You will not ask for my savings. You will ask for advice. And you will listen the way people listen who intend to change." Denise's eyes glossed with something close to anger or fear. It is hard to tell the difference when pride is interrupted. Kevin looked older all at once, as if the shape of adulthood finally landed and fit. "And if we do," he asked, "and what then?" I lifted my cup. "Then I'll feed you lunch," I said. "And we'll discuss what real help looks like." He laughed without humour. "Strings attached?" "No," I said, "roots attached." Strings tangle. Roots hold. The room exhaled. Outside, the maple did not move. The air was too still for that. Denise stood, the legs of the sofa whispering against the rug. "We'll come back," she said, and there was a new sound in her voice, less sweet, more human. "Tomorrow." Kevin rose slowly, picking up the suitcases he had set down with such confidence. He paused at the door. "Mom," he said, and his voice turned raw on the edges. "I didn't expect this." "I know," I said, and opened the door to the plain afternoon. "That's why it's happening." They stepped onto the porch, and I watched them walk back down the path I laid with my own hands, one stone at a time years ago when I decided my future would be a place I built, not a place I begged to enter. When the gate clicked shut, I returned to the quiet living room, picked up my ledger from the drawer, and wrote a single line across the page where quiet future balanced itself like a tightrope walker. Today I chose peace over pressure. Then I closed the book, washed the cups, and let the house return to the size it always was when it belonged to me. When the door closed behind Kevin and Denise that day, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, staring at the faint coffee ring on the wood. It was the same ring that had been there 13 years earlier, the day he told me he was done with living small. I still remember the tone, half pity, half disgust. He was 28, newly married, full of speeches he'd picked up from self-help podcasts about ambition and cutting out dead weight. I was the dead weight. The mother who'd worked double shifts to keep him in college, who'd sold her wedding bangles to pay the down payment on his first car, suddenly became a symbol of everything he wanted to outgrow. He'd said, "Mom, you don't understand how the world works now. You can't live your whole life clipping coupons." I'd smiled because tears give people satisfaction they don't deserve. He left that afternoon with his boxes and his pride, promising to call once he was settled. The call never came. For the first few months, I dialed him every Sunday. At first, the line rang. Then it went straight to voicemail. Then, one day, a robotic voice told me the number was no longer in service. Denise blocked me on social media. I watched birthdays pass like train stations, each one quieter than the last. At Christmas, I still cooked for 2 out of habit, then packed the leftovers into small containers for neighbours. I told them he'd gone abroad for work. A polite lie tastes sweeter than pity. It took 2 years for the ache to stop showing on my face. I filled the silence with overtime. The bakery needed a night cashier and I took it. Numbers were my comfort, predictable, obedient. Every Friday after my shift, I'd walk home under the yellow streetlights and put a crisp note into a small tin labelled Quiet Future. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The tin became a jar, the jar a folder, the folder a bank account. Each saved dollar felt like a vote for my own survival. Still, every once in a while, something cracked through the discipline. I'd pass a man on the bus with Kevin's build, or see a pair of sneakers like the ones I bought him for graduation. For a moment I'd think, maybe this week he'll call. Then the traffic light would change, and the fantasy would dissolve back into exhaust fumes. Years rolled by in neat, repetitive rows, the way grocery shelves do. Then came the letter from the bank offering me a savings certificate. The clerk said, "You've done well, ma'am. Not many people your age save like this." I smiled politely, but inside I thought, that's because most people my age still believe family is their retirement plan. The truth was harder. I'd saved not for comfort but as armour. Money can't buy love, but it can buy the right to refuse disrespect. It can buy silence when people expect you to beg. It can buy the luxury of saying no without shaking. One winter night, about 5 years after Kevin disappeared, I saw him on the local news. Not as a success story. No, he was standing behind someone else giving an interview about a startup venture. He looked well-fed, well-dressed, and utterly unfamiliar. I turned off the TV before the segment ended. It's strange how grief mutates. After a while, you stop missing the person and start missing who you thought they were. Then, 3 years later, I heard from a mutual friend that his consulting business had failed. Gambling rumours, unpaid rent, a string of debts. I said nothing. I'd already learned that when someone burns a bridge, you don't rebuild it. You let the ashes remind you of the direction you'll never walk again. Still, some nights, I'd open my ledger and stare at the numbers, wondering if I'd failed him by being too careful, too practical, too old-fashioned. Maybe he thought saving was fear, not foresight. Maybe he thought love meant endless rescue missions. I'd replay his last words. "You make everything about responsibility. No one wants to live like that." He was wrong. Responsibility is the only thing that survives betrayal. I remember the day I finally stopped waiting. It was the 11th anniversary of his silence. I withdrew a small amount of cash, went to a seaside cafe, and ordered myself a slice of lemon pie, the kind he used to like when he was little. I ate it slowly, every bite a tiny ceremony of acceptance. I told myself out loud, "He's gone. You're still here." After that, life became quiet in the right way. I joined a reading club. I started volunteering at the library, teaching seniors how to use email. I learned to sleep through the night without checking my phone. Then one morning, the phone did ring. Not Kevin, never him, but Aunt May, her voice bubbling with gossip. "You've done so well for yourself, Barbara. Everyone's talking about how smart you were to invest. Kevin would be proud." I laughed politely, said something about just getting by, but inside a small alarm bell went off. I'd seen this pattern before. First come the compliments, then the footsteps. 2 weeks later, those footsteps arrived at my door. The same door where, 13 years earlier, he'd walked out with his boxes and his certainty. The same door I'd closed on every apology I never received. So when he stood there again, this time with his lazy wife and suitcases and borrowed confidence, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry, just tired. Tired in that deep, steady way that comes from finally understanding how someone you loved learned to see you as a resource instead of a refuge. He thought this was about savings. It wasn't, it was about years. Years of silence, of work, of rebuilding a spine out of disappointment. The money was only a mirror. What he saw reflected in it wasn't wealth, it was everything he'd thrown away. That's what he never understood. I didn't become strong because I won something. I became strong because he left. And now, after 13 years, he was back. Not to apologise, not to reconcile, but to collect. And I, the woman he once called small-minded, had a choice to make, not whether to help him, but how to teach him what help truly costs. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. Same sound, different day. Kevin stood there. No luggage this time, only a folder clutched too tightly under his arm. Denise followed, her smile stretched thinner than yesterday. "You said to bring paperwork," Kevin said, trying to sound responsible. "We did." "Good," I replied, stepping aside. "Let's see how honest you can be in daylight." They sat where they had before, smaller now somehow, like the furniture had grown. The air between us was thicker. Truth always takes up more space than lies. I motioned to the folder. "Open it." He spread out a stack of bills, scribbled notes, a list of debts. I could see his handwriting shaking where he'd tried to look organised. "We owe about 22,000 in total," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Yesterday you said 15. He froze. Denise jumped in. "That was just a rough estimate." "Of course," I said lightly. "Roughness seems to be a family tradition," Denise bristled. "You asked for honesty. We're being honest now." "Then start by telling me how much of this debt came from necessities, and how much from things you thought would make you look successful." Kevin's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I said, "because survival debt is forgivable. Ego debt is not." The silence that followed was long enough for the clock to announce a full minute of discomfort. Finally, Denise said, "We made mistakes. Everyone does." "Everyone doesn't show up demanding room and board from the person they abandoned," I said evenly. Her voice rose just a little. "We didn't abandon you. I held up a hand. Don't rewrite history. You ghosted your own mother for over a decade. You cut off calls, skipped birthdays, and now you've walked back into my house pretending it's about love. It's not. It's about the safety net you think I've built for you." Kevin's face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said quietly. "Fair is the lie you tell yourself when you're cornered." He exhaled sharply and leaned back. "I came here because I need help, okay? I can admit that." "There's a difference," I said, "between asking for help and demanding what you believe you're owed. You walked in yesterday like a collector, not a son." He looked down, ashamed but not yet changed. Denise folded her arms. "You think we don't know what it's like to struggle? We've been drowning for months." "And yet," I said, "you're wearing shoes that cost more than my first month's rent." Her face stiffened. "They were a gift. I'm sure they were. But gifts come with strings, and debt is made of strings you pretend not to see." Kevin looked at me, eyes clouded with anger and shame. "You don't understand. The world's different now. You can't survive without taking risks." "I took risks," I said. "Just not the kind that ruin people." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You could see the gears turning. He was used to winning arguments by shouting, but shouting doesn't work in a house built on calm. I leaned forward. "Let me tell you what I see. I see a man who confuses loud confidence with leadership. I see a woman who mistakes control for partnership. And I see two people who came here thinking I'd be too lonely or too guilty to say no." Denise's eyes narrowed. "So what? This is revenge. You want to humiliate us?" "No," I said. "This is a mirror. You can decide whether you look into it or smash it." Kevin rubbed his temples. "We didn't plan to take anything. We just thought maybe you'd help us start over." "You planned," I said calmly. "Just badly." Denise's voice trembled. "You don't have to keep punishing us." "We get it." I tilted my head. "Do you?" "Because I haven't raised my voice once. Punishment is what the world will do when it catches up with you." "What I'm doing is education," Kevin laughed bitterly. "You think you're teaching us something?" "Yes," I said. "I'm teaching you what no sounds like from someone you can't manipulate." That landed. You could feel it in the air, the invisible click of realization. Kevin's expression shifted from irritation to something heavier. He looked around the room, at the photos on the wall, at the calmness he'd never earned. "I thought you'd changed," he said quietly. "I did," I replied. "You just never stuck around long enough to see what the change cost." I stood, went to the cabinet, and pulled out a thin file. "You're not the only one who can bring paperwork," Kevin frowned. "What's that?" "Information," I said, "the kind that protects people who plan ahead." I opened the folder and slid a few sheets across the table. Bank statements, notarized documents, an estate plan. Denise's eyes widened. "You hired lawyers?" "I hired Clarity," I corrected. "Everything I own is protected. My accounts, my property, my investments. There isn't a penny you can touch without my consent." Kevin's mouth fell open slightly. "You don't trust your own family?" "You stopped being my family when you started seeing me as a wallet," I said. "Trust is built with honesty, not DNA." Denise's hands shook slightly. "That's cruel." "No," I said, "it's boundaries. Cruelty is pretending to love someone because you need their money." Kevin stood, pacing now, the way he used to when arguments slipped out of his control. "So that's it? You just write us off?" "Not at all," I said. "I'm giving you a chance." He stopped. "A chance for what?" "To be honest," I said. "Tell me everything you've hidden. Every debt. Every lie. Every favour you still owe. I already know some of it, but I want to hear it from you." Denise shifted uncomfortably. "You don't know what it's like out there. Everything's stacked against people like us. People like you," I said, "or people who blame everyone else." She glared. "You think saving money makes you better?" "No," I said softly. "It makes me responsible. There's a difference." The air grew tight again. The ticking clock became louder, the house a stage with 3 actors circling the truth. Kevin finally sat down, exhaustion creeping into his shoulders. "We borrowed from her parents," he said, nodding toward Denise. 15,000. Told them it was for a business. Used it to pay rent and bills instead. Denise shot him a look that could cut steel. "Kevin!" He ignored her. "We maxed out 2 credit cards. Sold my car. Took another loan under her name. I thought if I could just land one big client, it would fix everything. But the client never came. And then you came here," I said. He nodded slowly. "Because I didn't know what else to do." That was the first honest thing he'd said since he walked back into my life. Denise crossed her arms. "You can't expect us to rebuild from nothing. We're not kids." "You're right," I said. "You're not kids. You're adults. Which means you rebuild by choice, not by invasion." Kevin dropped his gaze. "So what do you want from us?" "Accountability," I said. "The kind that doesn't end with me writing a check." He frowned. "Meaning?" "You're going to make amends, not to me. To everyone you've borrowed from, lied to, disappointed. You'll pay back what you can and apologize for what you can't. That's how you rebuild." Denise scoffed. "That's humiliation. It's honesty," I said. "Something you've both been allergic to." Kevin leaned back, exhaling. "And if we refuse?" "Then you'll learn the other lesson," I said. "What lesson?" "That not all doors open twice." I gathered the papers and stood, signalling the conversation was over. "You have a decision to make," I said. "Come back when you're ready to live in truth instead of comfort." Kevin's voice cracked slightly. "And if we do?" I smiled faintly. "Then maybe we'll talk about the future." "Not mine, yours." They left without another word. I watched them from the window, walking slowly down the path, the weight of honesty dragging their steps. For the first time, Kevin didn't look angry. He looked scared. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that fear was the beginning of something real. As the gate closed, I whispered to myself, "Round 1 goes to peace." They didn't come back the next day. Not the next week either. I assumed that was the end of it, that pride had once again triumphed over truth. But then, one rainy afternoon, I heard another knock. A softer one this time. The sound of people who no longer assumed they were welcome. When I opened the door, Kevin stood there, drenched, holding an envelope. Denise lingered behind him, her umbrella trembling in the wind. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. No arrogance now, no smirk, just exhaustion. I stepped aside, and they entered like ghosts returning to a house that no longer belonged to them. We sat in silence for a moment, the sound of rain tapping the windows like a metronome for judgment. I gestured to the envelope in his hand. "What's that?" "Our debt records," he said. All of them. And something else. He slid the envelope across the table. Inside were papers, bank statements, loan documents, even a few apology letters written but never sent. Then I saw it, a police notice. My fingers paused. "What's this?" Kevin's voice was thin. "A summons. For business fraud." I looked up sharply. Denise was staring at the floor. "They're investigating the company," she said softly. "The partner we blamed, Marcus, he didn't steal from us. Kevin did. Not on purpose, just bad bookkeeping. But it looks bad. The truth sat there, heavy and alive. So you came to me," I said slowly. "Because you weren't just broke. You were running from the consequences." Kevin nodded once. I panicked. Thought maybe you'd help before it got worse. I studied him. The man who used to roll his eyes at my grocery lists. The boy who once refused a second-hand jacket because it didn't fit his image. "You lied," I said. "I know. You tried to manipulate me again. Yes. Why tell me now?" "Because," he said, his voice cracking, "you were right. There's no shortcut left." Denise wiped her eyes. "We're not asking for money anymore," she said. "We just need guidance. Guidance." The word felt foreign coming from her mouth. But something in the way she said it, tired, hollow, almost ashamed, told me they had reached the part of the story where lessons either take root or ruin people completely. I stood and went to my desk drawer. From it, I pulled a folder, the one my lawyer had prepared after I won a small inheritance years earlier. I'd added to it ever since. "You're not the only one who's been doing paperwork," I said. Kevin frowned. "What do you mean?" "I had you checked." He blinked. "What?" I opened the folder and laid out the pages. Investigator reports, financial histories, even credit data. Denise gasped when she saw her own name printed on one of the sheets. "You investigated us?" "I protected myself," I corrected. "Because when people disappear for 13 years and return the day they smell money, that's not a reunion. It's reconnaissance." Kevin's face went pale. "You had no right." I met his eyes. "You lost that right when you turned your back on me." He said nothing. Denise bit her lip hard enough to colour it red. I could almost hear her thinking, calculating what was left to lose. "Do you know what else I found?" I said. "The accounts under false names. The money borrowed from your in-laws under medical pretenses. The fake invoices sent to clients. You didn't just mismanage a business, Kevin. You built a house of lies and painted it with family excuses." Kevin's jaw trembled. "Stop," he whispered, but I didn't. "You told me Marcus stole from you." "In truth, he covered your debts to keep the business alive. You dragged his name through the mud to protect your pride. He filed a report because you forced his hand." Denise was shaking now. "We thought it would blow over." "Lies rarely blow over," I said coldly. "They just wait for rain." The clock ticked louder. Kevin's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Fear, yes, but also recognition. He finally saw me not as a target, but as a mirror. "Do you know what Marcus did after he filed that report?" I continued. "He reached out to me." Kevin's head snapped up. "What?" He wanted to warn me. He said he felt sorry for me, because he knew eventually you'd come knocking. Silence stretched long and cruel between us. The rain outside had softened, but the storm inside had only begun. "I told Marcus," I said, "that I don't need anyone's pity. I told him I'd handle it myself. And I have." Kevin slumped in his chair, defeated. "So what now?" "You'll call the police. Let me rot." "No," I said simply. "You'll call them. You'll tell them you're cooperating. You'll make restitution. You'll clean your name the right way or you'll lose it entirely." Denise spoke up, trembling. "You're going to let him go to prison?" "I'm going to let him face his choices. If that leads to prison, then prison is where his lessons live." Kevin's tears came then, quiet, reluctant adult tears. "Mom, please," he whispered. "I didn't mean for it to turn out like this." "I know," I said. "But intentions don't erase damage. Only responsibility does." He covered his face with his hands. For a long time, the only sound in the room was his breathing and the soft tick of the clock, a metronome counting out years wasted on lies. I poured him a glass of water and set it on the table. "Drink," I said. "You'll need your strength." He looked up, confused. "For what?" "For rebuilding. You're about to start from nothing, and that takes more courage than pretending you had everything." Denise's voice broke. "And what about me? You, I said, have a choice. Stay and help him fix it, or walk away and repeat it with someone else. She opened her mouth to protest, then stopped. Maybe for the first time. She understood I wasn't the enemy. I was the test they'd failed before and were being given again. I went to the mantel and picked up the old photo of Kevin as a boy, his arm around me at his graduation. Both of us smiling like the world was safe. I spent years thinking I'd failed as a mother, I said softly. But I didn't fail. I gave you everything a child needs: love, discipline, and the tools to stand up straight. What you did with them was your choice. Kevin looked up, his face grey and tired. I don't know if I can fix this, I nodded. That's the first honest sentence you've spoken today, and it's also the first step toward fixing it. He stared at the papers on the table, the debts, the lies, the evidence. Then he looked at me. You really hired investigators? Yes, I said. And I'll keep them on retainer, because I won't ever again be the woman who gets blindsided by her own blood. He nodded slowly, like a man finally beginning to grasp the rules of gravity. So what do I do? You start by apologizing, I said. Not to me, to Marcus. To your in-laws. To every person whose trust you used as currency. His voice cracked. And you'll help me? I already am, I said. The truth is help. You just don't like how it feels. He pressed his palms together, the sound of rain returning outside as if the world itself was exhaling. Denise wiped her face. What if he really goes to jail? Then maybe, I said, he'll finally learn what freedom actually costs. The room fell silent again, heavy, honest. The kind of silence that only follows exposure, when there's nothing left to hide behind, only the truth and the people brave enough to face it. I walked to the window and watched the rain slide down the glass in perfect, merciless lines. You wanted my savings, I said quietly. Now you know what they bought me: clarity, independence, and the strength to stop being afraid of the people I love. Kevin's voice was barely a whisper. You're stronger than I remember. No, I said. You're just finally seeing me without entitlement in your eyes. He nodded slowly, painfully, like a man recognizing the end of one life and the beginning of another. And in that moment, justice didn't look like punishment. It looked like truth, cold, heavy, and necessary. The next morning, the house was quiet again. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside washed clean, like it too had been part of last night's reckoning. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, same seat as always, same cup, but the air felt lighter, emptied of lies, heavy with truth. At exactly 9:15, my phone rang. Kevin. His voice was rough, hollow. I called Marcus, he said. I closed my eyes. And? He agreed to meet. He said if I come clean, pay back what I can and sign an agreement, he'll drop the charges. I let the silence sit between us, letting the weight of his own sentence rest on his shoulders. Good, I said, Mom. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I didn't answer right away, because love after betrayal is quieter. It stops rushing to rescue. It simply waits to see if someone deserves the rope they're asking for. You're not out of the woods yet, I said finally. Owning up is one thing, living differently is another. I know, he whispered. I'm meeting Marcus this afternoon. And Denise. She's staying. She said she wants to help me fix things. For once, I believe her. I could hear it. The first hint of something real in his tone. Humility. Not the kind you perform, but the kind you earn through ruin. Then maybe, I said, this is where your life begins again. He was quiet for a long moment. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I already did, I said. But forgiving you doesn't mean forgetting what you did. It means I'm done letting your choices control my peace. He exhaled shakily. You really mean that? Yes, I said softly. Forgiveness isn't a reward for you. It's freedom for me. We said goodbye, and when the line went silent, I felt something unclench in my chest that had been tight for 13 long years. A week later, he came by again. No folder, no excuses. He stood on the porch holding a small plant, a peace lily. It's for you, he said awkwardly. I read They're Hard to Kill. Seemed appropriate, I smiled. You're not wrong. We stood there in the doorway for a long moment, neither of us quite knowing how to cross the invisible line between past and present. Then I stepped aside. "Come in." The kitchen was warm, filled with the smell of stew simmering on the stove. He looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. "You kept everything so tidy." "Habit," I said. "It's easier to find peace in a place that stays put." He nodded, glancing at the table where he used to do homework. "You know, I thought I hated this house growing up. It felt too small, too quiet. And now?" He sighed. "Now I wish I'd understood what quiet actually means." I poured him coffee. He took it with both hands, careful this time. "Marcus says I have a lot to make up for," he said. "He's given me a chance to work with him again. On probation, basically. He said he'll teach me how to run a business honestly." "That's generous," I said. "He said he wouldn't have done it if he hadn't talked to you first." I looked up. "He called me?" Kevin nodded. "He said you told him everyone deserves one chance to redeem themselves, but only one." I nodded slowly. "That's true," he smiled weakly. "Then I'd better not waste it." For the first time in years, I believed him. Denise came a few days later, alone. She stood at the gate, hesitant. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For showing me who my husband really is. Not the version I built in my head. The real one, the man trying to start over." "You helped him fall," I said. "Make sure you help him climb." She nodded, eyes glassy. "We'll do better." "I know we will. I hope so," I said, "because I won't step in again if you don't." "I understand." She turned to leave, then stopped. "You know," she said, "Kevin told me you named your savings account Quiet Future. I think that's beautiful." "It saved me," I said simply. Every deposit was a promise that I'd never depend on anyone's approval to survive. Denise smiled softly. "You kept that promise." "Yes," I said. "And now it's your turn to make your own." Months passed. Seasons changed. I tended to my garden, joined a local book club, and learned to laugh without feeling guilty about it. Kevin called every Sunday now. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes, sometimes 2. He never asked for money again. Only advice. He sent me small updates, how he'd started budgeting, how he'd begun volunteering with a local charity. Each time I hung up, I felt a quiet warmth, not pride exactly, but peace. The kind that doesn't need applause to exist. One morning, nearly a year later, I found a letter in the mailbox. No stamp, just my name written in Kevin's handwriting. Inside was a short note and a check for $500, for everything I owe that can't be repaid in words. It's not much, but it's honest. Thank you for teaching me that saving isn't about money, it's about respect. I smiled and slipped the check into the same tin where it all began, the one labelled Quiet Future. I didn't cash it. Some debts aren't meant to be erased. They're meant to remind us who we became after paying them. That evening, I sat in the living room, the last light of day spilling across the walls. My house, my peace, my story, intact. The clock ticked in its familiar rhythm, steady and calm. For the first time in a very long while, I felt truly wealthy. Not because of the money in the bank, but because of the boundaries I'd built around my soul. Kevin once told me that family means sharing. He wasn't wrong, but the truth is, sharing without gratitude is just taking. And love without respect is just noise wearing a mask. So if anyone ever asks how I survived 13 years of silence, I'll tell them this: I didn't just survive. I learned that peace is the richest inheritance you can give yourself. And as I turned off the lights that night, the house breathed easy around me. Quiet, steady, free.